Unlike the other sons of former President Theodore Roosevelt, Kermit Roosevelt never strove for political or military ascendancy. He went his own way into exploration, hunting, and failed businesses. The second son of Theodore Roosevelt and his second wife Edith Caro, Kermit was described as a dreamer, where his siblings romped on the lawn of Sagamore Hill, and later the White House. Kermit would sit with a far-off look on his face, his head in the clouds. This difference only grew as he got older. Without the pressure faced by his older brother, Ted Jr., Kermit was free to focus on other things. Chafing at Harvard, he accompanied his father on his African safari. There he got his first taste of wandering and wanderlust. Stalking animals by moon or sun, he found what he wanted to do, but unfortunately he still had a few more years of college to slog through first. Predictably, he was not the highest achiever in his graduating class. Not that Kermit cared. He took off for Brazil as soon as he could via a job with a railroad construction company. While his father was running for a third presidential term with a new third party, Kermit was hacking his way through the jungle to lay railroad tracks. His siblings busied themselves with their father's election campaign. Kermit was not even in the country when his father was shot on the campaign trail, and he didn't return from South America when he heard the news. Not that he wasn't distressed. He was horrified until the family sent telegrams informing him of TR's survival, but he had a job to do and an adventure to finish. This was not the end of Kermit's South American adventures. In 1913, he accompanied his father on the Roosevelt-Rondon scientific expedition to map the River of Doubt through the Amazon. The expedition was beset by malaria-carrying mosquitoes and dwindling supplies. At one point, Theodore was crippled by malaria and begged to be left behind, believing he would slow down and be the death of the rest of the expedition. Kermit refused. His suggestion of lowering their dugout canoes down cliffs with a pulley system saved the expedition valuable time and probably TR's life. The party made it through, and Theodore survived with treatment once they reached civilization again. During World War I, Kermit was initially part of the British Army in Mesopotamia. Unlike his brothers, he hadn't participated in much military training. While his brothers quickly joined the U.S. expedition under General Pershing, Kermit was in danger of being left behind in the U.S. His father pulled strings to place him as an officer with the British. It worked, but he spent much of his time in coffee shops, whereas his brothers served on the front lines in France. He was finally commissioned a captain in the United States Army on May 12, 1918, and sent to France in time to participate in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. After the war, Kermit would write a memoir, War in the Garden of Eden, about his experience and go into business with coffee shops in New York City. He would also expand into the shipping business. But his wanderlust never died. He continued to travel, even taking a hunting trip to the Himalayas with his brother Ted Jr. Specimens would be donated to the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, where Kermit also gave talks on his travels. However, his business ventures would suffer and his life would go down, especially after his father's death, as Theodore's presence had been a good influence. He alienated his family by hanging out with FDR in the hopes of gaining business deals, while his business bled money during the Great Depression. He took to drinking just as his uncle Elliot had, and became the new black sheep of the family. Also, like his uncle, he took a mistress, Carla. His family turned their backs on him, but his wife didn't. His wife, Belle Willard, was not the type of woman to run and hide her face at scandal. She'd hunted with Kermit through Asia and cheered alongside him at ringside prize fights. So instead of shrinking against a wall from society's glare, she took Carla under her wing. Despite numerous treatments for alcoholism, Kermit entered World War II still very much an alcoholic. Seeing the military as salvation, he jumped back into uniform at 50, and in the worst physical shape of his life. Once again, he joined the British Army and was sent to train recruits in Middlesex. In 1940, he was sent on reconnaissance to Norway and carried wounded men on his back in the Battle of Narvik. Then he was sent to Egypt, where he caught malaria and was subsequently medically discharged. 1941 found Kermit back in the U.S. Despondent, he suffered from fever and went out drinking, dodging attempts to commit him to sanitariums. Finally, strings were pulled to make him a U.S. Army major and get him stationed in Alaska, where the Japanese had taken 2 small islands. However, there was no combat. Kermit was confined to serving as a lookout. Despondent, Kermit was left alone with his thoughts. In 1943, he committed suicide in his Alaskan Army quarters.